Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are once again looking at an answers from the developers. Now I'm going to split this video into two parts. This part of the video is going to focus on the aviation side of things and also the ground forces side of things. The second part will focus on helicopters, where there is some definitely interesting answers to some ideas, and then also naval and the miscellaneous parts. So yeah, that's how we're going to do it. So if you're interested in the aviation and ground forces side, make sure to watch this, and if you're interested in the other stuff, make sure to watch that in the form of the naval and the helicopter stuff. There's some interesting questions, a lot of it basically talking about the future of the game and also some current game states, especially at top tier. So let's get into it. Let's go through the questions, the answers, and some thoughts and opinions. The first question for aviation is: the planned Swedish aviation tree list was missing the J-34, the Swedish Hunter modification. This aircraft was quite significant for Swedish jet aviation before the arrival of later domestic designs such as the Draken and the Viggen. It is planned for the tree at some point. There is also a unique Swedish prototype of the J-34 Hunter with an afterburner. And the answer is, in the release tree scheme we usually cover aircraft in the update in which this tree comes out and other vehicles in the nearest updates. And about the other aircraft, we plan a lot of additions to the Swedish aircraft tree, so the Hunter may appear after some time. So that pretty much says that it is maybe planned, but not in the most recent updates. Maybe next year, maybe the end of this year, who knows. But if we go to the Swedish aviation tree, which is of course the one which was released when you could access, the Swedish CBT, there are a few aircraft which are still missing, not added to the game, which we'll probably see in the next few updates. The first one being the S-17BS, a very, very early attacker in BR. But if we look at some of the jets, we have of course the J-35D, then the SK-60B is going to be around, and then another propeller plane, the MM-406. So hopefully in the next update we'll see some interesting stuff in update 1.97 for the Swedish. I personally think when it comes to their tree is very fun to play. There is a lot of incredibly similar vehicles in it, and yes, at top tier, they don't have a fully top tier vehicle, but the J-32B and then the A-32A, I think, do pretty well. It would be nice to see more Hunter variants in the game, especially after the real success of the Hunter F6 at higher tiers, and seeing them branch out to different nations. I mean, why not? Let's give everybody at least a little bit of the pie. The thing is, with the push towards mixed battles at top tier, especially for aviation, there isn't really a need to try and keep specific vehicle types to specific trees. Instead, why not try and spread the love? Why not try different things for different nations? The next question is: are you already working on the implementation of the air-to-air missiles for medium ranges? The answer: we are developing a missile battle system beyond visual range, since the technical implementation of the missiles themselves and the control systems require minor improvements to already existing missiles. But what kind of game assumptions it will require to let players use these missiles comfortably and counteract them? This is a difficult question. From one side, we don't want to make these missiles a weapon of inevitable and sudden death in the case where the target doesn't even understand that it has been fired on, and on the other side, there is no point to make them completely useless. This is exactly the same answer they actually gave to, let's call them short-range missiles, stuff that we already have in the game. I remember this answer from maybe about a year or two ago, talking about the AIM-9Bs, which were of course on stuff such as the F-100D, which had just come out the December before, in December 2018. So it's kind of interesting to see a very similar answer, pretty much put for exactly the same question, but changed for medium range. And yes, it isn't going to be fun in the game getting annihilated by something you can't see. This has been a thing I've talked about for a while when the A10 is brought up, the Warthog. And the Warthog is one of those vehicles, and obviously we're not talking about air-to-air here, we're talking about air-to-ground with stuff like the Mavericks. If you don't give something like the A10 Mavericks, it becomes pretty useless at higher BRs. It actually just becomes a detriment to a team to take it, just because it won't have any guided munitions, which you can stay away from the battlefield area and use. You'd have to get close to the battlefield area, then you get in range of stuff like the Tunguska, you get annihilated, and, c'est la vie. You'd also be incredibly slow compared to a lot of the jets flying around. So you have this weird thing where if you give it Mavericks and you give it the option to be able to aim them effectively, kind of like how you do in helicopters with some kind of screen system or some kind of third-person or first-person system, it's going to be incredibly strong, and there's not going to be a lot of counterplay to it. But if you decide to put it in and not give it all these systems, then it will be completely useless. And we see this to and fro, not just with airplanes, but also with helicopters, where they have systems added to them which are incredibly strong. A lot of people have brought up the KA-50 recently as one of those strong systems because of the range of its 80 gems, and you see a lot of people struggling with the counters for them if they don't play America. And it's the same problem with medium-range air-to-air missiles. We just have these systems where if they're just implemented into the game with no counterplay, no way of stopping the missiles tracking you, or no way of detecting them, it's going to be an absolute farce. It's going to be absolutely ridiculous, just like it is now if you're in an aircraft of, let's say, 80BR or A3BR, and you go up against a team full of stuff which has air-to-air missiles, which force you to maneuver, especially now that they've just increased the maximum overload of stuff like AIM-9Bs and their other tech tree equivalents. So now you're at a lower energy state, then you can get battered, and you can see the difference between, BR'd vehicles getting excessively stronger with, these additions. So it is a bit of a problem. It is something that needs to be sorted, and if I'm quite honest, at top tier has been a absolute mess for a very long time. I made the comment in update 1.77, Advancing Storm, when all of this tomfoolery started, when it came to just adding more and more modern vehicles, that this would happen. The fact that you would get these more modern systems, whether it came to air-to-air missiles, whether it came to ground-to-air or air-to-ground, basically automatic guided munitions was pretty much what I was talking about. And the problem is, as we've seen in the past, a lot of these systems come into the game without a direct counter. So they dominate for a bit, then they disappear, then the next dominant thing comes, and this has been the same trend for 2 years, and it's one of the main reasons why I try and stay away from top tier, because it's just not fun at all for me. And it seems like reading a lot of people's comments, they have the same opinion of it, but for some reason people keep bashing their head against the wall trying to play it instead of just finding other parts of the game to enjoy. And I believe something like this system, the air-to-air missiles at medium ranges, will also cause a lot of annoyance for a lot of people, especially if it's around the modification model, which is another problem which we'll get into. Do you have, the next question is, do you have any plans to add countermeasures for aircraft that had them? According to Phantom FGR Mark II Aircrew Manual, Weapon System 2nd Edition, the FGR-2 had a chaff flare system introduced with a mod 855, and the MiG-21 SMT could also have a retrofitted countermeasure system too. The answer is yes, we plan to add defense systems for aircraft, such as flares and radar warning systems, which were equipped with them in real life. And yeah, it makes sense, right? We've already had automatic flare dispensers put in for helicopters. I'll be incredibly surprised if aircraft in the game don't also get them. The main issue is there aren't actually a lot of aircraft right now in-game that would have them. So let's say you throw in, the more machines which have, access to these medium-range air-to-air missiles that I talked about before, or just better air-to-air missiles, there still won't be a ton of vehicles which have these counter modifications in play. So that's going to be a real issue, and it's going to be a real annoyance for a lot of people. But it is nice to see that they are at least thinking about the defense side of things about the all-out offense. The next question is, do you plan to improve the performance of aircraft sights by bringing their functionality closer to realistic ones? That's an odd question. The answer is, it isn't clear what is exactly meant, so it is difficult to answer this question. And we can say that gyro sights with radio rangefinders already work more realistically than before. The sights take into account the distance to the targets and flight parameters and displays the firing solution by taking into account the limitation of the platform. Yeah, I would need a little bit more when it comes to improve the performance of them. I'd need some examples of aircraft sights which need to be made more realistic, because the problem is if you go down the whole realism angle, then you're going to end up with certain machines just having way better, third-person sights than other ones, or way better tracking than other ones. And also, as I said, I just need to visualize it a little bit better. So it would be nice if that question had a few examples attached to it of stuff which could be improved. Also, something that I didn't mention before: these questions and answers are answered by Vyacheslav Bulanikov, or BVVD. He's an individual who does the streams with Sean when they have a look at like the pre-update stuff. So the live, when they do the live streams of like the pre-update machines and just show some stuff off, that is BVVD, who is with Sean there, at least on the English side of things. The last question for the aviation side is, why in combined RB battles can you take a helicopter with ATGMs equipped at the start of the battle, and for aircraft with unguided aircraft rockets you need to get more respawn score? Are there any plans to change it? The answer is that there are several reasons for that. Well, that's good to hear. One of the main ones is that technically the helicopter is able to capture an enemy point, so even in case of strong imbalance in the teams, the victory is still possible by kills and by capture points. This isn't the case for aircraft. The original idea of the respawn score was to limit the possibility of creating a highly unbalanced vehicle preset for the type. One team is in aircraft and second one is in tanks. Okay, so let's break this down. The second point, talking about the idea of a highly unbalanced vehicle preset, one team is in aircraft and second one is in tanks, I completely agree with. I think the biggest issue that you would have is, having, for example, one team in tanks and the other team in helicopters. This is happening right now. So the secondary point is talking about how the original idea of the respawn score was to limit the possibility of these highly imbalanced vehicle presets. You already have them, and not just looking at win rates, because one of the interesting things, if you actually have a look at, I've been watching a lot of replays from top tier of American teams versus Soviet teams, and also German teams as well, because when I look at the win rates of vehicles like the M1A2, the ADATs, the Leopard 2A5, they're incredibly high, and the T-80U and even the KA-50, they have low win rates overall compared to these vehicles, and I was just wondering why. Because I keep hearing about the fact that the KA-50s are racking up kills, they're annihilating the meta, all of this stuff. And what actually is happening is, after looking through maybe about 50 replays of high-tier players, what is happening is people are banning the larger maps, so therefore the helicopters can't get, long-range hits on individuals. They have to get close to the battlefield, so therefore there are a lot more, there is a lot more easier ways of hitting them and actually doing damage to them. There's no long 10-kilometer distance between them. And then what's happening is, because there are so many helicopters on the Soviet side trying to ping off tanks, there is nothing on the ground for the Soviets, or there is hardly anything on the ground for the Soviet side, and therefore the American or the German teams just run over them, and run over them hard, absolutely annihilate the Soviet team, because they just don't have anything on the ground, and the helicopters aren't as effective as people are saying that they are. So what is actually happening is, even though, the Ka-50 spam is, real, and it's doing a lot of damage, it isn't actually stopping American teams and German teams, winning games. So if we just look from the win rate point of view, it's a horrible way to look look at it, because it doesn't tell the whole story, which is why when we talk about balance and stuff, we can't just talk about win rates. You know, you have to take into a bunch of other factors, and this would be a scenario of a highly unbalanced vehicle set, you know, which is talked about, because you have one side which has a lot of the killing power, and you have the other side which actually has, you know, the really high win rates. So it's really weird, you know, how it's actually working out on top of this. The other idea is the main one being technically, I love the use of technically here, technically the helicopter is able to capture an enemy point, so even in case of strong imbalance in the team, the victory is still possible by kills and by capture points. I mean, mate, that's a big technically, isn't it? The only time I've personally ever seen helicopters capture points is either right at the end of battles where there is nobody left and the team has already won with the helicopters on the side, or a sneaky, cheeky AH-1G who has been, you know, going into, let's say, the southern capture point on Fulda, trying to get a cheeky cap in before he tries to get up and run away again. So it is possible, technically, but it is one of those things where I would like to see these other reasons, talk about these several reasons here. For me, I think the major issue is there is an imbalance at top tier. There's always going to be an imbalance at top tier because, as I said with the points before from update 1.77, top tier has been designed for this idea. It's been designed to just have this insane imbalance, and, you know, they've tried to fix that by balancing through trying to change, you know, stuff such as reload rates and stuff such as speed on vehicles and armor on vehicles, but it's not going to work because you just keep throwing mechanics on mechanics on mechanics on mechanics, and everything just falls apart. So yeah, it's I'm not personally satisfied with the answer to that question, because first of all, you haven't listed the several reasons. You've listed one, and that's it. And then on top of this as well, you've actually made a case for the fact that you already have these highly unbalanced vehicle presets because of the fact that helicopters can spawn in from the start. So for me, that's just not good enough. We need a better answer for that, or we just need the other reasons that you talk of here. The next bit that we're going to have a look at is ground forces, and the first part of ground forces is a question about hull-mounted MGs, which seems to be something that has been a hot topic for a while, and I don't really know why. I think the top-mounted MGs are much more interesting. So let's go for it. Some tanks are still missing functional hull-mounted MGs. In addition, some low mid-tier Japanese and German tanks don't have their AA MGs mounted on the roof, whilst most American and Soviet vehicles do. I'm not sure about that Soviet one. Most actually don't, especially low tier ones. Are you still working on making MGs functional for all vehicles? Do you plan to bring Japan and German tank-mounted anti-aircraft MGs more into line with the Allied ones? The answer is, when adding machine guns, or rather when reviving them, we first of all included the most necessary and useful ones, coaxial and a cannon, and also anti-aircraft guns. Offensive machine guns also had very low efficiency in real life due to poor visibility and small sectors of fire, and in the game they appeared as an exception on the vehicles that don't have any other machine guns. The latter refers to German SPGs or Japanese tanks which had a rather strange design without a coaxial machine gun. As for anti-aircraft machine guns of rifle caliber, their efficiency in the game is quite low, as well as against aircraft as against ground targets. Therefore, the priority of adding them to the game is quite low, and we often have higher priority tasks, but we will continue to add them when possible. And I generally agree with this answer, even though it's nice to see, you know, hull-mounted MGs fire. You know, when you play a lot of the Japanese vehicles, you know, you see them fire. It doesn't really do anything. You know, the only thing you might maybe do with it is maybe kill an AA which has no armor on it, such as a truck like a Gaz, or maybe you mark a target for an ally. That could be something, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not doing a lot. The top-mounted MGs do a hell of a lot more, and I disagree with the statement that they aren't very useful. At least in my experience, the amount of damage that AA-mounted guns on on the vehicles, they can do a decent amount of damage, and there is definitely discrepancies between certain vehicles. One of the problems grinding out the Chinese tech tree is obviously the Chinese tech tree has not a lot of AA at low tier, so you don't have any AA guns on top of your vehicles, and you have no AA in general. So that could be a place which really benefits from these, top mounted, MGs. There's even a vehicle in the tech tree which should have a 50 cal, and the reason it doesn't have a 50 cal is I don't know. The M4A4. The M4A4 has just sat there, and the fact is, if you look at the premium one, it does have a 50 cal on top of it. So what is going on there? Why does the premium one have an AA armament and the one in the tech tree doesn't? That seems to be something, that seems to be a disparity that should be looked at. So yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'd like to see more machine guns on vehicles. I understand why it isn't a high priority, but it would be lovely to see. The next one is a vehicle. So after the Shilka, we are waiting for the ZSU Yenisei, or Yenisei, not exactly sure how to say that. Almost all other nations already have such vehicles. Is it still planned to implement this vehicle? Yes, it is still planned. Wonderful. So I think the one that it's talking about here, the ZSU Yenisei, is the ZSU 37-2. It's pretty much a prototype vehicle that just has two 37mm. It also seems, I believe it has some form of radar system on it that was tested. But for me, when I look at a question like this, it reminds me of two of the big gaps in at least the major tech trees, and I'm sure a lot of the other tech trees have the similar issues, such as the Chinese. But the fact is, from 4.7 to now 7.3 for the British, because the Falcon got moved down, and also 4.7 to 7.7 for the Soviets, there's these huge gaps of AA. There's this huge gap where there just isn't any AA vehicles, and yes, you can up tier some stuff like the BTR, which is not too bad. The Crusader AA Mark II isn't too bad, but still, they need to be filled, and stuff like this ZSU 37-2 and also something like the Skink would be just perfect machines to be able to put in there. So it is nice to hear that this is planned. Would be nice to see if the Skink is planned as well, just so we can fill that gap, which has been there for, 5 years at this point? Maybe 4 years? The next question is the Chinese ground tree could really use some more attention for its low-tier SPAAGs and also its top tier in general. Are there more unique vehicles planned for this tree in the coming year? The answer is yes. The Chinese ground forces research tree suffers from the lack of decent anti-aircraft guns at low ranks as well as at high ranks. We understand this, and several models of the Chinese SPAA are already in the development and will be added during this year. Well, that's good, because they were in the tech tree. They were literally in the the CBT tech trees. If you know what to look at, it should be on the screen now, and you can see some of them are planned, some of them are soon, and we'll go through all the vehicles which were planned and soon, for the Chinese. So the planned ones, you have the ZTS-63A, and I have done a separate video looking at these. I think I will do another video just going over them, just to show you what could be coming for the Chinese tech tree. The Type 59-2, of course, the Type 79, a bunch of ZTZs, the 96, 99, and also 99A. Then you got the CM25 TOW, and then the PTZ89, which will be a very fun machine. And then you have stuff such as the Duster, which actually came to game, and also you have the PGZ80, which I believe is also in the game. It's just the Chinese hull with the ZSU 57-2 turret on it. The PGZ88, which is their radar-guided AA. And early tiers, of course, the ZSD 53 or 63, I can't exactly see. I believe that is the one which has the 23mm on it. Should be a hell of a lot of fun. And then the SDKFC 222. So there is options. They are going to be coming. Hopefully they come soon. Some of them do have soon TM on them, so hopefully we'll see them in the coming months. The next question is, are you working on a laser warning system for ground vehicles, which is very necessary for a protection protection against helicopters in the current environment of the game? The answer is technically it is easy to implement such a system. Yeah, just do the torpedo thing where you just get somebody. If any of you have seen like the IT crowd, it's kind of similar to that, where there's a fire, you know, in the place, and Moss is literally, you know, typing out a you know, an email, and he's literally like, alert, fire. Like, you could definitely easily do something like that, just like you do in naval, where it's like, torpedo is ahead, torpedo ahead, watch out. You know, you could do that in ground forces, where you just have your commander going, oi, there's a missile coming. But anyway, yeah, the rest of the answer is the problem is that there are still very few vehicles in the game that carried such a warning system. And yeah, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Welcome to realism at the end of the day. Enjoy your stay at top tier. It must be a wonderful place because for some reason we have these fantastical imaginatory vehicles, but for some reason, for their realistic modifications, we have to stay historical. How very weird. But then don't forget about all the ahistorical stuff. Don't worry about that. But these systems, these need to be historical. The next question is, why did you not activate kinetic piercing of HE shells, which have a delayed fuse for such a lengthy time? And that's actually a very good question. The answer is, as before, the kinetic penetration of armor-piercing shells has been taken from different sources, so we temporarily transferred all the HE shells for instant action in the fuse. In other words, the armor will be penetrated only by the explosive action of the explosion. In the future, it is planned to select the coefficient for the HE shells for the formula of the penetration of the kinetic action and return the fuse with slight delay. In general, this setting doesn't change much for HE shells. So they're working on it, is pretty much what they've talked about here. You got to remember they put in the DeMar formula last year around this time, so it's been around for about a year at this point, which made it you know, basically gave a standard for all shells when it came to how they are worked out on the equation side of things. You also had the Lanzo which works for APFSDS, so much more of the high tier shells. It's nice to see they're still working on stuff like the HE mechanics, which did take a big hit in the DeMar formula stuff. I hope one day the KV2 gets back to its donking self, but we'll have to see in the future. The last thing I also just want to mention is one thing that I missed for the aviation stuff when they were talking about defensive systems such as chaff and flare system. Make sure to not forget about War Thunder DMM, the Japan boys, who have already stated at the start of the year that they're working on stuff like the F4EJ model or the F4EJ Kai, then stuff like the Kaiser KM808, the bomb guidance system, the Type 91 one, and also stuff like the ECM pod, the ANALQ-131, some Type 90 air-to-air missiles, so literally 1990s fully classified missiles, and of course some sounds as well. So yeah, that shows that we should be seeing that pretty soon, at least if we're looking at, you know, medium air-to-air missiles on top of it. Overall, when we look at these questions, I generally agree with a lot of the answers. It's nice to see some positivity when it comes to looking at what's coming, you know, further in the game. I have honestly no idea how they're going to balance medium-range air-to-air missiles. I don't think they're going to. I don't think you actually can, because if they're going to stick by this historical standard of the vehicles need to have the systems, you know, installed on them to be able to survive, then there's going to be a lot of vehicles which are just out of luck and they're just not going to get played because they're just going to get twatted. The other thing as well, the helicopter one, as I said, not a great answer. We need to know the other reasons why they are able to be first spawned, and it's not a question of should it's not a question of should airplanes alongside helicopters be first spawned. The question should be, why are helicopters first spawned? Why can they not be second spawned along with aircraft? Is their usability therefore destroyed? What is the actual answer to that one? But yeah, hopefully we get a better answer next time when talking about helicopters. And another thing to also mention about that idea, the idea that one of the main reasons is that they can technically capture enemy points and also, you know, be able to get kills and capture points, then why in naval forces do float planes not have the same treatment? why can I not first spawn my H6K4? Why can I not first spawn my Kingfisher? Why can I not first spawn any of the float planes in the game, such as the HE51, the event plane? Because then that would mean that your ideas are consistent across the game modes. Right now, that is obviously not the case, so it is how it is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and look forward to the one where we look at the helicopters and the naval section in the next one. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Ambrosius McClellan, B. Young, Blackie, Chris Giltnane, Daniel Stanton, Jay Wilt, John Ryman, Martinez, Moxie, Super Cacti, Trigger Hippie, Eugens Terry, and also Elove Goat and Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.